It might seem like the worst place to breed tropical fish, but Israel is trying to turn unproductive land into areas that make money.
If you dig anywhere in the Negev desert, you might expect to find dust, maybe limestone, or nothing at all. This desert gets rain twice a year if it's lucky. Temperatures hit 113 degrees in summer.
What does a desert mean?
So deserts are basically dry lands, and if there is not enough water, there is not enough food.
So when Israeli engineers drilled 2,300 feet through solid rock, they struck something impossible: water. But this water was boiling hot and salty. Too salty to drink and deadly for crops. Any sane country would have capped the well and walked away. But Israel looked and asked one question: what kind of fish can exist here?
You said you're growing things in the water, in the desert.
Yeah, actually it's quite unique.
Today, 1 million tropical fish swim in this water, and the story of how they got there changes everything we know about farming. The water source problem. The Negev covers 60% of Israel, but it receives way less rainfall than Death Valley. For most of human history, nobody lived here permanently because you cannot farm what you cannot water. But in 1973, a geologist named Iri Isar was studying underground formations when his team drilled through sandstone and struck water. The drill punched through 2,300 feet of crust and hit the Nubian Aquifer. When they pulled the drill out, water exploded out of the ground. The artesian pressure was so intense that water shot upward without any pumping required, a self-flowing well powered purely by underground pressure. This water had been underground since before humans even discovered fire. Geologists call it fossil water because it fell as rain when the Sahara was green, then got trapped in porous rock as the climate shifted. It has been sitting there in total darkness under crushing pressure for between 20 to 40,000 years, since the last ice age when the Sahara was a grassland.
The point I often make, which I think is worth making again and again, is how different the world was during the ice age. The Sahara Desert was green.
The pressure was so intense that when the drill created an opening, the water rocketed to the surface without any pumps at all. Now the Nubian Aquifer stretches beneath 4 countries: Egypt, Libya, Chad, and Sudan, covering over 770,000 square miles. It is one of the largest underground water reserves on Earth, holding an estimated 120,000 cubic miles of water. That's enough to fill Lake Superior 40 times over. The Israeli section is the northernmost tip, a fragment of this massive underground sea that extends beneath the Negev and into the Sinai Peninsula. Israel had discovered an ocean beneath the desert. Except this ocean had 2 problems that made its water completely worthless. First, the temperature. The Earth's core heats everything near it. At 2,300 feet down, geothermal energy keeps this water at a constant 99 to 104 degrees Fahrenheit. That's the temperature of human blood. You can't cool crops with this kind of water. You can't even drink hot water in a desert. The second problem, salt. This water sat in rock for millennia, dissolving minerals, and that resulted in brackish water with salinity around 3,000 parts per million. That is 1/10 the salt content of the ocean. It is not seawater, but it is salty enough to kill wheat, corn, tomatoes, and almost every commercial crop in a matter of days. Engineers tested the water on experimental plots.
The state of Israel is using this salty water here on the shores of the Mediterranean to refill our natural biggest source of fresh water, the Sea of Galilee.
And within 72 hours, vegetable plants showed signs of salt stress. Leaves yellowed, growth stunted, and within 2 weeks, most plants were dead. The Agricultural Ministry issued reports concluding the water comes nowhere close to be used for irrigation. The logical thing to do was to close down the well and forget about it, right? But one scientist asked a different question. If nothing we grow can survive in this water, what already survives in water like this one? The answer was in rivers 5,000 miles away, in the tropical rivers of Australia and Africa. The fish farming innovation. a prehistoric-looking fish native to the coastal rivers of Australia and Southeast Asia. It has been eaten by humans for 40,000 years now. In its natural habitat, barramundi live in river mouths where fresh water mixes with seawater, creating brackish conditions. They spawn in salt water, then migrate to rivers. Their bodies are built to handle fluctuating salinity, and more importantly, barramundi are tropical, which means they thrive in water between 79 and 93 degrees Fahrenheit. This makes barramundi nearly impossible to farm anywhere in Europe or North America.
How do we encourage efficient use of water? With the water comes the sewage. What can we do with this sewage?
During winter, outdoor water temperatures drop below the survival threshold. Fish farmers have to install heating systems that consume staggering amounts of energy. Fish farmers in Northern Europe spend tens of thousands annually on heating systems, burning fossil fuels to maintain tropical temperatures through 6-month winters. In the end, the consumers would have to bear the burden, making barramundi really expensive. Now, Israeli researchers also identified tilapia and sea bass as candidates. Can tolerate salinity up to 15,000 parts per million, 5 times higher than the Negev water. Sea bass, particularly the European variety, naturally migrate between freshwater and marine environments throughout their life cycle. But in the Negev, the water comes out of the ground already heated to the perfect temperature. No heating bills. The geothermal energy that made the water useless for drinking made it perfect for tropical fish. Winter in the Negev still sees air temperatures drop to 41 degrees Fahrenheit at night. But the water pumped from 2,300 feet down stays at 100 degrees. The fish live in the permanent summer.
I'm trying to compound in my head what it takes to do a project like that.
This water that would kill crops in days actually keeps fish skin healthy because it mimics their natural environment. So in the early 2000s, farms like Kibbutz Mashabe Sad and Aquitec Fisheries built massive earthen ponds and concrete tanks across the Negev. They drilled additional wells to tap the aquifer, then installed pumps and aeration systems and filled the ponds with lots and lots of barramundi, tilapia, and sea bass. The fish adapted instantly because, of course, this was just like home. Within months, the desert had become one of the most productive fish farming zones in Israel. The scale ramped up really quickly. Kibbutz Mashabe Sad now operates ponds covering 30 acres. Aquitec Fisheries expanded to 49 acres with production exceeding 800 tons per year. A single pond holding 264,000 gallons can support. But every fish farmer knows that keeping fish alive is the easy part. The hard part is keeping them alive in their own waste. And that's where things began to get a little difficult. The fish waste problem and the way out. Within months of scaling up, the Negev farms hit a wall every fish farmer dreads: waste accumulation. A single barramundi eats roughly 3% of its body weight daily. In a pond with 100,000 fish consuming tons of feed, ammonia levels spike fast. The same compound in household cleaners. At just 2 parts per million, it burns gills, damages nervous systems, and kills fish. The ponds were poisoning themselves. Now here's another problem. The fish waste contains ammonia and nitrogen, which is really toxic for their survival. At concentrations above 2 parts per million, it burns fish gills, damages their nervous systems, and suppresses their immune response. Bacteria in the water convert ammonia into nitrite, which is also toxic, and then into nitrate.
It has been cost prohibitive historically,
which is less toxic but still a problem at high concentrations. The result is that the water becomes progressively more poisonous to the creatures living in it. Traditional fish farms solve this problem in 2 ways. Option 1. Install mechanical and biological filtration systems. These systems pump water through sand filters, biofilters with beneficial bacteria, and sometimes ultraviolet sterilizers. They work, but they are pretty expensive. The pumps alone consume enough electricity to power 50 homes. Operating costs can exceed $30,000 to $50,000 annually just for filtration and aeration. The second option would be to dump the dirty water. Sounds crazy, right? But ocean fish farms in Norway, Chile, and Scotland flush waste-laden water directly into the sea. It dilutes in the ocean, so the fish survive, but the environmental cost is something to talk about. Excess nitrogen and phosphorus fuel algae blooms that choke marine ecosystems. In the Negev, neither option made any sense. Filtration was way too expensive for a farm using free water. Dumping was impossible because there was no ocean nearby and water in the desert was too valuable to waste. The engineers were stuck with millions of gallons of warm, salty, ammonia-rich water that would kill the fish if it was not replaced, but was too precious to throw away. That is when someone looked at the ammonia and saw something no one else saw: the double usage system. The breakthrough came from an unexpected angle. Ammonia is toxic to fish, but to plants, ammonia is nitrogen, the single most valuable nutrient for growth. Farmers globally spend over $100 billion annually buying synthetic nitrogen fertilizer produced in chemical plants using natural gas. The Haber-Bosch process alone consumes about 2% of the world's energy supply. The fish weren't producing waste. They were producing fertilizer organic, nitrogen-rich, and free. Ammonia is one nitrogen atom bonded to 3 hydrogen atoms. Nitrate is one nitrogen atom bonded to 3 oxygen atoms. Plants use both forms. The Israeli engineers realized they didn't have a pollution problem. They had a resource distribution problem. Farmers globally spend over $100 billion per year buying synthetic nitrogen fertilizer produced in chemical plants using natural gas. The process is called Haber-Bosch, and it consumes 2% of the world's energy supply. Fish waste is nitrogen fertilizer. It is not synthetic. It is organic. And it is free. The Israeli engineers realized they did not have a pollution problem. They had a resource distribution problem. The fish were producing exactly what crops needed, in a form crops could use. The challenge was connecting the two systems without killing either, which would be a really tricky one. So instead of filtering the water or dumping it, they built irrigation pipes directly from the fish ponds to agricultural fields. The water flowed out of the fish tanks, now cooler because it had released heat to the fish, and into the root zones of olive trees and date palms planted nearby. The crops absorbed the nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium from the fish waste, and boom! The soil acted as a living filter, with bacteria breaking down ammonia into nitrate and plants pulling nutrients from the ground. The first tests were done really carefully. Farmers worried the salt would probably kill the trees, but none of that happened. Shockingly, the olive trees grew extremely fast. The dates grew larger. Fruit yields increased by 15 to 20% in the experimental plots at Mashabisad. So why did it work so well? Because fish waste releases nutrients slowly. Synthetic fertilizer dumps nitrogen into soil all at once, and plants can only absorb so much at a time. The excess washes away into groundwater or runs off into rivers, causing pollution. Organic waste from fish breaks down gradually. Plants get a steady supply of nitrogen over weeks instead of a single burst. The result is healthier growth with zero waste. The salt, which everyone feared could ruin the whole thing, turned out to be manageable. Olive trees and date palms are both salt-tolerant species. They evolved in the Mediterranean and Middle East, where soils are naturally saline. They can handle water with salt concentrations up to 5,000 parts per million. The brackish water from the fish ponds was 3,000 parts per million, well within tolerance. In fact, the mild salt stress improved fruit quality. When plants experience slight stress, they concentrate sugars and flavors in their fruit as a survival mechanism. The system created a closed loop. Water went down into the earth, came up hot and salty, nourished fish, picked up their waste, fed trees, filtered through soil, and seeped back into the aquifer cleaner than it left. A perfect symbiotic cycle. Nothing goes to waste. Long-term monitoring revealed an unexpected benefit. Salt levels in irrigated soil remained stable over years, even decreasing in some areas. Date palms and olive trees actively absorb salt, concentrating it in older leaves that fall during pruning. The trees weren't just tolerating brackish water, they were desalinating the soil. This meant the system could potentially rehabilitate salt-damaged farmland across the Middle East and North Africa, where millions of acres lie barren from improper irrigation. However, the most surprising benefit was not really biological, but money. The economics that made it possible. The thing about water in Israel is that it costs a lot of money. Fresh water from desalination plants costs between 60 and 70 cents per 35 cubic feet. A single 2.5-acre plot of crops can require 88 million gallons of water per year. At 70 cents per 35 cubic feet, that is an insane $7,000 just for water. Most crops do not generate enough revenue to cover that much cost. A typical olive grove generates $12,000 to $15,000 per 2.5 acres annually. If half goes to water before any other expenses, profit margins evaporate. This is why 60% of Israel is desert, but produces minimal conventional agriculture there. But brackish water from the Nubian aquifer costs almost nothing. The drilling was just a one-time expense paid decades ago. That's it. The pumps run on electricity, but the water pressure is so high that pumping costs are minimal. Farmers pay roughly 5 to 10 cents per 35 cubic feet. That is a 90% discount compared to fresh water. Now here's the genius. By using the water twice, the cost gets split between two industries. The fish farm pays for pumping the water up. They use it, warm it, and dirty it. Then the agricultural farm pays nothing for the water because it is being reused. They get free irrigation and free fertilizer. The fish farm benefits because their water cost per 2.2 pounds of fish drops to almost zero. The crop farm benefits because they avoid buying both water and fertilizer. The system also eliminates waste disposal costs. Traditional fish farms spend way more money treating or dumping wastewater. In the Negev, the wastewater has premium value. The fish farmers do not have to pay to get rid of it. They simply sell it or trade it to crop farmers. The result is a smooth, symbiotic economy where two industries that would normally compete for water instead share it. And this works because neither industry could afford the water alone, but together they make a perfect team. A fish farm using fresh water at 70 cents per 35 cubic feet would take long before they go bankrupt. In the same way, an olive farm buying synthetic fertilizer at $300 per ton and fresh water at 70 cents per 35 cubic feet would soon have to pay through their noses. But a fish farm using 10-cent brackish water and an olive farm getting free water and free fertilizer can both profit. This is why the system has caught lots of attention. Today, there are multiple fish farms in the Negev producing over 3,000 tons of fish per year. The fish are exported to Europe, where Israeli barramundi sells in supermarkets in France, Germany, and the United Kingdom. The olives and dates are sold domestically and internationally. Israeli barramundi now competes in European supermarkets alongside fish from Australia and Southeast Asia. Desert-farmed fish underselling ocean-caught varieties. The Negev isn't producing fish despite being a desert. It's producing fish because it's a desert. The conditions that make the land hostile to conventional agriculture, hot, dry, salty, made it perfect for a system that conventional agriculture could never use. But the system's implications extend far beyond fish and dates. Nobody expected this carbon equation. Agriculture is a carbon-intensive system. Synthetic fertilizer production emits nearly 500 million tons of CO2 annually, about 1% of global emissions. Transporting fertilizer adds another 100 million tons. Pumping and treating fresh water consumes massive energy. The Negev system eliminates these emissions at multiple points. The Negev system cuts carbon at every step. Zero synthetic fertilizer means zero fertilizer production emissions. Zero freshwater transport means zero pumping and treatment emissions. Using geothermal heat instead of electric or gas heaters saves the equivalent of 200 tons of carbon dioxide per 2.5 acres of fish ponds every single year. But that's not even where it ends. Fish farming in the ocean or in freshwater rivers disrupts wild ecosystems. Bottom trawling for fish meal, the primary ingredient in fish feed, destroys seafloor habitats. But the Negev system uses closed ponds. Nothing escapes into the wild. No ecosystems are disrupted. The fish feed is increasingly plant-based, reducing reliance on wild-caught fish meal. Some farms now use feed made from algae grown in the Negev using the same brackish water. The entire system is becoming a closed loop where inputs come from waste streams and outputs feed back into the system. The whole system literally feeds itself and nothing goes to waste. Date palms and olive trees sequester carbon through photosynthesis, locking it into wood and roots for decades. A 25-acre plantation with 1,000 mature trees can remove tens of thousands of pounds of cause, annually offsetting operational emissions from the farm. A mature date palm absorbs somewhere around 44 pounds of carbon dioxide per year through photosynthesis, locking it into wood, leaves, and roots. An olive tree sequesters 66 pounds per year. A 25-acre plantation with 1,000 trees removes 66,000 pounds of carbon from the atmosphere annually. All that carbon stays locked in the trees for decades, offsetting the emissions from farm operations. When you combine carbon savings from eliminating synthetic fertilizer, reducing water transport, using geothermal energy, and sequestering carbon in trees, the Negev system is not just carbon neutral. It is carbon negative. It removes more carbon from the atmosphere than it emits, a food production system that heals the planet instead of destroying it. Other arid nations took notice. Egypt, with access to the same Nubian aquifer beneath the Western Desert, launched pilot fish farms using Israeli technology. Saudi Arabia, a country even drier than Israel, heavily invested in integrated aquaculture agriculture projects in the desert near Riyadh. The technology, born from 2,300 feet, in a place no one believed was possible beneath the Negev, was spreading to every desert on Earth. Israel looked at water everyone called worthless, too hot, too salty, too deep, and asked one question: what's this perfect for? The answer? Tropical fish that need heat, salt-tolerant crops, and a system where one organism's waste becomes another's food. They didn't fight the desert or try to terraform it. They asked what it could do better than anywhere else. The lesson here isn't about fish or water. It's about constraints that useless heat eliminates heating costs, that deadly salt filtered which crops could thrive, that toxic ammonia became free fertilizer. Every problem was a feature once they found the right combination. As aquifers drain, soil degrades, and climate shifts, the question isn't whether we can sustain what we have. It's whether we can see what we haven't imagined yet. The Negev proved that impossible is just another word for nobody's tried the right combination. 1 million fish swimming in a desert was proof that possibilities exist in the most unlikely places.